I'll introduce myself and try to talk as less about me as possible and more about the lessons that I've learned over this journey. And while I'm pretty sure that of the 25, we crossed 24 people who are over here, I'm sure I suppose most of you are freelancers and much of this might be Captain Obvious, but hopefully there'll be something else that you learn from my experience that will help you out in some other way or the other. So that's really the aim of doing this. I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time. In fact, the inspiration for this came when I started getting a lot of questions on my Twitter saying that 2020 has been a great year for me in terms of freelance, tried a whole bunch of things, it worked, etc. And I got a lot of queries asking, all right, we'd love to know how you went about doing this. I'm also thinking of quitting my job and doing freelance and stuff like that. So I've always had this idea of doing a session as such, but I just couldn't commit to one because of lack of time, interest, or whatever. And Abhishek slyly slid into my DMs, as they say, and said, "Hey, we'd love to do something like this." And we've been in touch ever since, and finally managed to make the time to do this in January. And this is looking very, very forward to this. So first up, sorry. Yeah. So first up, that's my full name, but that's usually too long for many people, and that's what most people call me. The story for that will be given much later. It's a very, very lame story, and whatever you think the reason for this name being around her, it's I guarantee you it's not it. But what I do right now is I do a little bit of content I write for the hard copy. In fact, Abhishek and I had met when I had interviewed him for a article on the hard copy. I do some op-ed writing for Array. I do some marketing things for clients. I do some teaching things. As I said, it's the same template as well as you can see. And I do some passion projects. The Origin of Things is a podcast I run. The Third Slip and Things of Internet are two newsletters that I run. One is a news summary newsletter, and the other is sort of like a bit of digital marketing and communications over the internet, etc. Don't worry, I'll plug all these links later. In the past, I've worked in a bunch of marketing and communications roles. I worked in a few agencies and I worked at OML and Insider. OML, of course, being the company that manages the NH7 Weekender and a whole bunch of comedians. And Insider was their ticketing division that got bought over by Paytm. So I was part of that entire transition. So I guess I technically worked in a startup. And I've written for a whole bunch of guys as well. So I'll try to. So before I get into sort of my lessons and takeaways, I think it would be very useful to set context in terms of where I came from, because I think a lot of where I am today and the lessons that I have, I think they work best in a certain context. So it's some of these things were planned, some of these things were just accidents. So I think it would be useful to set that journey in some ways. So I'll try to sum up this journey in 2 minutes. 2002 to 2006, I, like everybody else from South India, tried to do engineering. So I'm technically a chemical engineer. And then after that, no, I didn't study. I went to Madras to apply my software skills. And once in a while, I'd pose outside the IIT for a photo op. Then I went to MICA, where I studied how to make PPTs and got dunked on my birthday like this. Then the recession of 2008, 2009 hit us. We were the recession batch. So it was interesting that I had to take a job I had dreamed of getting into a big agency, but had to end up settling for a smaller agency, which turned out to be, in hindsight, a great decision for me. So by day, I would do this, and by night, I would attend concerts, which was another passion point of mine. Around that same time, I started freelancing. I started writing. I did gig reviews. That was my first ever freelance gig, really. And I also did a bit of cartooning. I used to draw a comic series for MBA website called Pagal Guy, and I did a whole bunch of other comics as well around that. This is one of my favorite comics that I've drawn. This is actually about the Maharashtra elections in 2014, still relevant today. It's like everybody's fighting with each other. So I did a bunch of things. I tried a few other things as well, like the Pagal Guy comics, entirely based on MBA humor. A friend suggested I try converting that into a comedy thing, and I ended up doing that. In fact, one of my happiest moments was when I actually managed to perform that comedy set at IIM Ahmedabad, and one of the professors whose learnings I made fun of was in the audience, Abraham Koshi, who co-wrote the book with Philip Kotler. So as you can see, I've just tried to do a whole bunch of things. I count tenacity more than talent, than for where I ended up in doing all these things. And then I joined completely different. I got out of the agency life, had enough of that. Complete something completely different was when I joined OML and did stuff like this. And 2 to 2.5 years into that, I finally signed out of Slack on all devices, and I've been a freelancer ever since. I've done a bit of writing. I do a bit of teaching. This is my setup, as it were, right now. You can see the Iron Maiden poster over there, Abhishek. And currently, that's what I do. I do a little bit of teaching. I do a little bit of marketing work for clients. I do writing once in a while. My wife has joined me on this journey as well, and together we have an informal setup called Rough Paper, which just does all those things. And I think the most important thing for me in the last 2 years has been managing to do all this while maintaining sanity and a decent blood pressure. This is a stock image, by the way. I couldn't find my medical reports. Sorry about that. So that's my journey. I think it took a little more than 2 minutes, so I'm sorry about that. So part one, some things that have worked for me. Some of this, again, might seem captain obvious to many of you. Some of this is more just around productivity rather than freelancing per se. So I hope there's a little bit of overlap and everyone gets something out of it. So I've divided this into two parts. One, some things that have worked for me, so 5 or 6 points over there. And the second part is really stuff that I think are right and I have a gut feeling about, and I hope to validate over the next year or next couple of years. So part one is, yeah, this is works, and part two is like, yeah, I think these are the things that might work, but let's just put them on a presentation anyway. So some things that have worked for me is calendarizing the heck out of my life. This is what my last week was like, and I'm very anal about putting everything and anything into Google Calendar. Even personal time, I know that seems a little weird, but for me, it's very important to know, when to switch off completely. Otherwise, that creep always happens. Work into personal time into, like, it's very clear in my head now as to when stuff happens. As you can see, I immediately have my second newsletter to finish right after this call. Especially exercise. I think that's one thing that we tend to take for granted. I think that's very, very important for me. Give yourself some amount of breathing space. You'll see there's a fair amount of white space that I've put in there, and that's deliberate for a reason, because you need time to switch off, and obviously projects don't go exactly as planned. So it's important to account for that. It's important to account for changes and revisions. So if I'm writing an article, which I know is going to take me 3 hours, I account for another 2 hours sometime later in the week when revisions from my editor comes. If those revisions don't come, then great, I can move on to something else, so I can just utilize that time for learning or something like that, or just do nothing at all. That's the joy of being a freelancer, really. That's learning number one. Learning number two is, at least these are things that work for me. I must mention, your mileage may vary, obviously. When working, break tasks down as much as possible. Sometimes it's very easy to get intimidated by a big task. When you need to write an article about the financial industry, that seems intimidating. But once you break it down into segments of 5 to 15 minutes each, then it becomes very, very easy. All right, 5 minutes, do some research, 10 minutes, do this, do this, do this. And suddenly your next 2 hours, which look very intimidating, are broken down. It also gives you a motivation to stay on the clock and keep checking off tasks as well. And before you know it, you've actually utilized your time pretty well. It's also great to, just stop all other distractions. I'm very anal about, turning my phone off, or at least on silent, when I'm in one of these 2 or 2.5 hour zones. Which brings me to the next thing, which is actually using pen and paper. I'm actually a big advocate of using pen and paper. I mean, I don't write and mail it across to my clients and stuff. But what I do is I actually use paper more for thinking, structuring, etc. And a lot, having that space, scribbling all around the place. I mean, most of my articles and the stuff that I do, even the courses that I conduct, are initially on paper. In fact, I have notebooks for each like topic. There's one for teaching, there's one for a client that I'm working on, there's one for the hard copy. So I think this session made it to, in the screenshot that you're seeing is actually the notes for this particular presentation that I'm doing right now. So I really like work on pen papers. The way I've always worked, the distraction freeness helps. Also gives me an excuse to buy fountain pens, which is something that I've started getting into recently. It's a lovely little pen called Vaziro over there that you're seeing. Sometimes your clear thinking just becomes clearer when you put it down on paper. The way I think about it, it's easier to play around on paper than even on the best note-taking app, at least in my experience. Just something that comes very intuitively. This is the way I try to work. Think on paper, execute on computer. So when you're at the computer, you're in it just to execute. You're not really thinking. all that thinking happens while you're on paper. I have a tablet where I do all the research and I scribble on paper. So this is one thing that's helped me a lot. Build a workspace that works for you. I don't like freelance advice like clear your desk or things like that, because everybody works differently. There are some people who might thrive in a messy environment, so it's important to find what works for you. That being said, there are some few things that I would recommend, like taking care of your wrists, having a good chair, a foot, all those basic things. I think those really kind of help. I think experimenting, seeing what works for you, is the most important thing. Utilize the power of templates and canned responses. Because of the various things that I end up getting myself into, I end up typing the same things over and over again. So I've actually created a whole bunch of templates on Google, on Gmail, which is one of its most underutilized features, I think. And I have responses for everything, from range, like I have 4 or 5 for the course, one for the newsletter that I run, some for freelance advice and things like that. Which podcast do I recommend? All those kind of things. If I find myself having to repeat myself more than twice, I realize that it's worth investing in just writing a proper answer out once and then either copy pasting that from a Word doc or a Google doc, or just using it as a template over here. This has saved my life saved a lot of time. That being said, customize as much as possible. If somebody has filled up a form and sent you a small note or something, make it a point to address that while you do. Make it seem as personal as you can, but don't type out the whole thing. Have excellent visibility over expenses and income. Obviously, I think this is freelancing 101, but I've seen so many freelancers not knowing how to do this. So I think this is a very, very important thing for me. As a result of that, I'm actually planning to take April and May off completely, because I have a reasonable sense of how much money I'm going to be making in these 3 months, which will tide me over for a small break. This is something I've tried to do: invest in building relationships over short-term gains. Most of the clients that I work with today, I have had for 6 months to a year, including the hard copy RA and a bunch of others as well. And when you do that, I think building that amount of trust is very important, because it also gives you opportunity to do work with them later, right? Something that you recommend today, they may not have the money or budget for, but might end up being something else later. So, for example, if I'm signed on to, say, a website content writing project, they might be hiring me for that at the moment, but I'll like obviously try to nurture that relationship, and it has to be symbiotic. You can't look at it from, oh, this I can milk more money out of this guy. I think that's always been a very predatory thing, which I've not been a fan of, and two, that's kind of like the reason I got out of advertising, because I got tired of selling services that clients obviously didn't need. And that weighed on me. So I really didn't want that to creep through to the way I did my personal freelance work. So I've always tried to do that. And as you can see, I've found a COVID friendly stock image rather than the shake hand one, which was my first choice. The flexibility in terms of pricing. Obviously, pricing is one of those things that everybody has an opinion and take on. And I can't say that I have a perfect method. And I've tried various things, ranging from charging on a per hour basis for content writing or whatever. But sometimes you realize that clients say things like, why should I pay you per hour for a content writing task? So I think a little bit of flexibility in terms of pricing, especially for businesses that you want to work for, are important. I'll tell you what's worked for me. My simple method was just this. I thought that at the end of year one of freelancing, I need to make the same amount of money as my last salary was. Right? That was my simple objective. Then doing a little bit of math, you work backwards and figure out what your hourly rate is. Saying that you're going to work for 7 or 8 hours a day into 5 days a week, so much, so much, so much. You arrive at whatever, $1,000 an hour, $2,000. This is sort of like my internal benchmark, and not something that I necessarily need to give to a client. Obviously, basis project and all that. So now what you can do is, now you can either pitch your hourly rate if the project demands that, or you can figure out a project fee. So if you're asked, okay, I need a website done or something like that, you can figure out, all right, if the content is going to take me this much time, this much time, this much time, that into my hourly rate of 1,000 rupees, say, is equal to, say, 40,000 rupees. So then you have a band to play with, either 30,000 or 60,000 or whatever the case is. You have a threshold below which you will not go, obviously, because then it's not worth your time, and there's probably something else that you can take up. Right? So you can adjust up or down depending on that. This is like a simple method that I've followed, and it's really saved me a lot of hassle in terms of, am I charging the right thing, wrong thing, etc. There have been people who have come and told me who says you're very expensive. There have been others who come and say, dude, you could have charged a lot more. So I think with that balancing out, I think I'm doing fine. The thing is, like I said, my metric is my blood pressure going up? It isn't. We're fine. It's okay. I really don't care if I'm undercharging, as long as my needs are kind of met. If you're unsure, then my recommendation would always be to do a trial period. And when I say unsure, I don't just mean in terms of money, right? Sometimes a project sounds great at the initial stage, that's that honeymoon period, but once you get into execution, we realize that it's a lot more complicated than it actually is. I think this happens for every project, no matter how good it looks in the beginning. So I always advocate doing like a sandbox period of like a month or 3 months or whatever the case is. Make all possible mistakes at that point of time, but you have to be in agreement with the client that this is a trial period for us both to figure out whether this whole arrangement is working. Then after that, we'll figure out, all right, we thought this is going to take 30 hours of my time, but it's actually taking up 60. Or and you have to be transparent with the client. You say, okay, listen, I thought that I was going to do 30 hours, but actually it's taking only 10 hours, which means I need to charge you less for this. I think obviously that happens on a case by case basis. Something that I've done is work for me, because when you're honest with the client, that actually guarantees you longer term work. So I look at it from that perspective. A lot of my success for freelance is just because I'm very, very lazy. So I would find it easier to nurture an existing relationship rather than having to pitch every 3 months again and again. And if it means being honest right now is the best way of doing that, then so be it. I don't think I'm a noble person or something. I'm just damn lazy. So that's, I think everything that I do stems out from there. And obviously, once you have this sort of range, then you can add your asshole fee. Sorry if I violated rules by saying that, but you know what I mean with respect to that. Or if it's a business that you aren't necessarily kicked about, then instead of 1,000 rupees an hour, you can price yourself at 3,000 rupees an hour, for example, right? So that if you don't get it, you're like, yeah, that's okay. If you get it, then great, right? You get, at least you get money out of it, if not creative satisfaction. And you can and similarly, you can subtract something else like long term or a nice person discount, or if it works in a space, for example, that you're personally passionate about or invested in. For example, if there's anyone in an NGO who reaches out to me, for instance, I'm not a socially minded person, but I obviously will not charge them what I would charge for, say, a funded startup, for example. Right. So, these are the factors that work for me. I must mention these are the factors that work for me. The first part of my presentation is everything stuff that work for me. And it's actually, I would say that this should be a starting point for anyone who wants to take things forward. You can either do the same thing, add in whatever you think works for you, and then make your choice accordingly. My idea of sharing all this is really so that you have the factors that matter to you so that you can take a call accordingly. um, the next thing is document everything, no matter how small it is, no matter how good you are with respect to personal relations with the person. Like, I'm working with one of my best friends right now, and we have made it a point to document everything, because we just don't know when things might go wrong. Everything I said, from that sandbox period to the time, everything, we are completely transparent in terms of everything, and that's really helped so far, because once you have that headache, both of you can just focus on doing good work. Two simple points to answer when you are reaching out to somebody for business, or if somebody is reaching out to you, is why you and why them, right? In the sense, the number one mistake that I've seen people who are doing cold calling is having the same template over and over again when they're reaching out to people. And that really leaves a bad impression. Not a bad impression, but it doesn't leave any impression at all. People don't remember you. People don't know what your specific skill is. I attended design conference last year, and I remember one of the guys had gone up and said something like, the worst portfolio to build is a portfolio that says I do graphic design, visual design, animation, illustration, this thing, and basically 10 things, which is basically the various branches of graphic design, of design at large. Um, but being known for one specific thing as far as possible, that kind of helps. Or even, why am I reaching out to you, right? Is it because I'm a big brand name or something and everybody wants to work with? No, it needs to be something like, hey, I've followed the space that you're interested in, or I've worked in this space before. So it's sort of like that templatized mail that I said. You may not want to type out a whole answer every time, but whenever I reach out to somebody, I always say, all right, why have I reached out to you, right? What skills and interests do I have when reaching out to you specifically, people need to feel like that mail has been sent to them specifically, even if 80% of it ends up being the same. There's this thing, right, that 99.6% of our genome is same to apes. It's that other zero point 0.4 that makes all the difference. I think that same thing applies over here. That 0.4% of your email, it should be more, is what really makes all the difference in terms of reception as well as them being able to remember you. It's very unlikely that people who you're reaching out to on cold email or LinkedIn have something for you immediately, but when it arrives, they will remember you for sure. Be clear on why you're freelancing and optimize for that. And honestly, this is more advice for people who are looking to freelance more than a group of experienced freelancers. So be clear on why you're freelancing and optimize for that. Is it because of the money? Is it to satiate your own creativity, or I just want to do something on my own? Is it to have independence and control over time, which is honestly my number one reason? Or is it just like I just want to take a break and clear out my head? It's been 10 years of corporate work. I just want to like slow things down a bit and then look at what happens next. These are likely to be the reasons. You might have another one. I would say put all of these down and then rank whichever is most important to you, so that you know which one is more. If it's money, for example, then you're very clear in terms of what you're going. It also means you need to be ready to sacrifice everything else, right? Or at least it needs to take second billing. For me, number three was the first point. I really just wanted control over my own time, the projects I take, and I needed to be responsible for my own success as well as failure. So today, if I was to abuse somebody, I would have to abuse only myself, because I put myself in this situation. For me, then number two would be, for me, the second thing would be three, and then, so on and so forth. I think the reason I don't want to say this should be your number one is because various people come from various backgrounds and have various requirements. Somebody might want more money. I am nobody to begrudge them that, right? Everybody's driven by different motivations, and you don't know what the backgrounds of the people are as well. They may need money for reasons that you and I might be privileged enough to not need. So whatever it is, I think it's important to have that sense of clarity before going for freelance, and to constantly try and optimize for that. So those are some thoughts that I have about why I seem sane today. And part two is where things I think will get a little more interesting. Some thoughts I think are right, and I hope to validate. I think we should be doing good for time. And I'm sorry if I speak
Yeah.
a little faster than you're used to, but from the world of marketing, this is pretty much the speed that we are going at. Abhishek, anything? No, going to look at all the questions only at the end. Is there anything I should be doing right now?
Uh,
Everything okay?
no, I think if you're okay with it, can we just take one question in
Yeah,
between?
yeah,
I think
100%.
it'll give some time to like process also, like all
Yeah,
of
fair,
this
fair enough, fair enough.
content
Uh,
thrown. So
yeah.
Shubrank had a
Yeah.
great question here where like he was wondering if you could share a real example of how you charged and maybe some thought process behind it.
Wait, so
It's
I see.
perfectly yeah.
Okay, 1 second. I will just, sorry, where
It's
was,
not there in the Q&A. It's like
okay,
posted in the chat thing. So
okay. So what is the question again? Sorry, I was searching for the question. Tell me again.
yeah, the question was, could you share any real examples of how much you charge for a particular project
Yeah,
and your thought process behind it?
yeah, sure. So,
Maybe rather than sharing the numbers, maybe you can just
no,
talk
that's okay.
about
That's okay.
yeah.
I'm completely comfortable with that. See, for
Okay.
me, so I go, so again, this is a process that worked for me, right? So I'm just going to go back to that one slide that actually said this, right? So if you were to go by this, my hourly rate I figured out would be somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 or something like that, right? That's broadly where I saw myself. And I had like like a gap. I would not go below 500 an hour, for example. I was very clear about. Somebody had one of the first gigs that I ever got was somebody had said, "Hey, I have a startup in the space of logistics. I need somebody to help write a website." It's one of those typical two-sided things where you have two different types of audiences. So my thought process for that was, again, I've never done content writing for a website before, right? So again, we got on very well, which was great. And I sort of calculated and said, all right, I'll need X amount of time for research, as in like to just understand the space, speak to you, ask all the right questions, etc., which should take around 5 hours. Then the writing by itself will take writing and the layout for the website. I'm not a designer, I'm not a UX guy, I'm not a tech guy at all. I'm just a pure content writer and a little bit of a marketing guy, I suppose. So my job over there was really say, okay, these are sections I recommend. This is the layout I recommend. I make layouts using PowerPoint, not even using one of those wireframe tools. I'm going to give you the layout. I'm going to give you the content for each of them, and I'll make sure that the content is deployed finally, because what you write in a Word doc might look completely ugly when it's in final design. So you'll have to make sure that things are done over there as well. So I was involved in implementation, though I was not the implementer. So I would take the designs and say, okay, things look fine. You can make a few adjustments here. Or that icon didn't turn out as well as we hoped it would, etc. So things like that. So that would be, for example, another 5 hours. So you have 5 plus 10 plus 5. So 20 hours, $1,000. All right. So the thing I should start with is 20,000. Then I kind of, okay, I don't want to fleece this guy. So I'm not going to go till 40. But reasonably well funded up startup, so maybe 30,000 might be a good place to go. Asked for 30, got 25. That's essentially how it worked. And then 50% advance, 50% on project completion. That's how that worked. Now, another industry that I worked on, also financial industry, where it was for an investment management firm based out of Bombay. Same process, almost exact time frames as well, except because the topic was a little dense, I raised the fee just a little bit because I really needed to sit in that office, understand exactly what they were offering and things like that. And again, it's an investment management firm. It's not like they're short of money or something. So for that, instead of 25, I think I got paid something like 45 or something. It also ended up taking a lot more time than I expected to, so it was worth it for me at the end. So that's an example of a content writing project that I did. Sometimes when I'm contacted by people like Array, for example, right, they have a fixed fee, so that makes your life easy. Then you can just figure out whether it's worth it for you or not, right? So then you can say, okay, if they're paying something like say $5,000 an hour, then you see, okay, this is the type of articles that they want, is going to take me this much amount of time. Then you can balance out and see, all right, is it worth it for me or not? Also keep in mind, some of these might be repeat. Like I know for a fact, for example, when I was very heavily involved in writing for Array, I used to write some 6 or 7 pieces for them a month. So that easily can, even though your per hour thing might come down, just because of sheer volume that they're giving you, it might end up being a substantial amount of money. That's really it with respect to the type of projects that I take up, because the way I structure my marketing fees, for instance, would be similar to the content example. I'll figure out roughly how much amount of time it will take and things like. If it's a completely new project, like I told you with my best friend, I'm working on something. This is something completely blue sky. This is something that he's never attempted before, something I've never attempted before. Dare I say it's something that not too many people have attempted before. Fingers crossed, it'll all turn out well. So then we were very much in agreement in terms of, all right, let's try this for a period of 3 months. This is how much time I'm going to take. Hence, this is the range that I'm willing to play with. Let's do this for 3 months. And then after that, let's be ready to, either take this up 100%, take this down 50%, or just scrap the entire project because the trial wasn't working. So there, some spaces you might need an open mind completely. That's how I have worked. I think this process works very easy, very well for me. I could probably be charging a lot more, I know, but for me, it's that trade-off between, do I really want to get stuck in all this negotiation and everything, or just getting done with work quickly. So that's what's worked for me. I hope that helps as an answer.
Yeah. I think Shubhrank already mentioned that.
Yeah.
And just to add, I think it's like, I would say, pricing, or like whatever fee you're charging, it's also a process, right? It's okay if you don't get it right in the first or second chance. Like,
absolutely. Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Yeah, that's the other thing. I think you need to, instead of getting too caught up in one particular negotiation, you have to ask yourself, I think another thing to ask yourself will be, all right, how far am I willing to go to do the admin work in order to get this project, right? If it's going to take about like 5 hours of back and forth in order to get a 20-hour project, then it's not worth it for me. It shouldn't be worth it for anybody, really. How much of this negotiation, how much of the headache do you want to put yourself through? So I think there are lots of factors that really come into play. And then see, you have to, like, I am a huge proponent of worst case thinking, right? Which is, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen over here? Which is, okay, I'm undercharging myself, but that means I just need to slog for 20, 30 hours. It's okay. I've learned a valuable lesson at the end of this. I've figured out what my rate is, or you figure out that a 20-hour project is going to end up becoming 30 hours. All right, it's a lesson for next time. That's the, every project has to teach you something. So that's the way I kind of look at it. I try to have as chill an approach as possible rather than, take too much stress for these things. Like I said, my number one thing is how to lower the temperature in the room, really.
Awesome, man.
Do you want me to take another one before I go ahead?
As you wish, man.
Yeah, all right. So I'll take one question Shubrank had asked on the Q&A. Product designer wanting to go location independent, what gear would you recommend? Interesting. Laptop plus graphic tablet, laptop plus iPad, something like Surface. So I'm actually completely the wrong person to ask for this because I don't do any sort of graphic work as such. That being said, I do have a Wacom tablet, but that's because I used to do a lot of cartoons at one point of time. So I used it and I know how to use it properly. And these days, just to make it feel used, I use it for when I teach. I use it as a for whiteboarding and stuff like that. But apart from that, the gear that I have, I'll tell you what I have and why I specifically need this. I have a desktop computer purely because I've always loved desktops and I love tinkering around with, SSDs and stuff like that. So that's my setup. Although, truth be told, there are times when I just wish I could simplify this and get a laptop. If I were to do that, I would buy a Surface, which would be around 65K or something like that. I have a wireless keyboard. I have a gaming mouse. Even though I'm not a gamer, I use all the buttons for commonly used tools like copy paste and everything. So that's right, I bought a gaming mouse and use it for copy paste, screenshot and everything. So it's the least appealing thing to hear on a Saturday morning, I suppose. I have a mic. Sorry, you might hear a bit of disturbance. I have a mic over here because I do podcasts and I do a course and stuff. It is an investment of 3K or 4K and it's served me pretty decently. But I really think it depends on what your setup is. Like, I know that most of my work, actually 95% of my work is going to happen in this room. So I don't mind a desktop. If I knew I was going to be sales pitching all the time, I would definitely have a laptop. If not a laptop and a desktop. Then apart from that, I would see a tablet. It completely depends. A tablet I use recreationally. I use it for reading more than actually work per se. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I carry that and a Bluetooth keyboard. And I think it depends on what you need things for, right? Like I have, for example, then there are very small productivity things that I've always come across. For example, I have this very nice USB hub over here, which just clamps onto the side of the table, which I found, I know it's a small thing, but these small things actually become very, very invaluable for me. Apart from that, I'm an audio person, so I have like a headphone amp, proper like 30K headphone and stuff like that. So, that's sort of like my investment as such. And this chair and an ergonomic footrest are among the best investments that I've made from a hardware point of view. But apart from that, I don't have a very good answer for your question, purely because I've not been in that situation all that much. When I've traveled for work and for teaching once in a while, I've carried my wife's laptop with me when she was using an office laptop at that time, and a tablet for reading and earphones. That's pretty much about it. I don't, and of course a mouse. I can't stand a trackpad. I cannot for the life of me figure out how people work on a trackpad. So I need a mouse at all points of time. So that's what works for me.
Great.
Yeah, I saw a question on personal branding also, so I'll get to that in a bit. It's an interesting question, though I don't feel completely qualified to answer that. I'll give you my perspective on that, which is why all that is in part 2, which is stuff that I don't think I am qualified to talk about yet, but I'm just putting out there. All right, let's go. I'll try to finish this in about 10 minutes so that we have a bit of time to answer all the other questions as well. Some thoughts I think are right and I hope to validate. First, of course, there's no one right way to freelance. So take any advice that you see on, this is the right way to freelance with a pinch of salt. Read those, see which bits are relevant to you, etc. I think there are a lot of great articles on Medium, for instance, which talk about freelancing. I can't point to one in particular because I love love Medium as a whole, and I just consume a lot of their content. It's a great subscription to have for $50 a year, and I would highly recommend to everyone, because you have a great variety of writing, not just for freelancing, but pretty much for every interest you have. I get a lot of content around technology, politics, music, and other spaces that I'm interested in over there. And especially for the startup tech community, there's a wealth of great writing over there, most of which I'm unable to understand. But I think that would be a good publication. But even then, whatever advice you come across, if it sounds prescriptive, then take it with a bit of salt. I think it's important to adapt, whatever works for you. So if there's a piece of advice you come across that says, have a clean workspace, that might work for the author. It may not necessarily work for you. You might be a person that thrives in chaos, for instance. So adapt to whatever works for you would be my advice. Deciding what project to take up, right? For me, at least two of these criteria need to be met. It makes me money. It teaches me something new completely, either in terms of a skill or in terms of an industry, which I could monetize later. That's very important. There's no point doing work for the financial industry and taking effort to learn that unless you are going to apply that learning somewhere else. Doing work once for a financial services industry, for example, might be a headache, but it makes your job of applying or doing work for other financials, saying, hey, I wrote the website for these guys, I think I'll be able to do a good job on this as well, take me less time, etc. So then there needs to be something over there. It could be an opportunity to do more later, like I mentioned with some of my clients, or if it's just doing good, right? Your mileage will completely vary. There might be 3 or 4 more reasons that you have, but I think it's very important for everyone who's doing freelancing to kind of, okay, these are things that matter to me, right? These are things that matter 100% to me. These are things that matter 20% to me, right? And then rank, organize. I think this little heuristic, if you will help you a lot. So I've converted this into, because I'm an MBA, I've converted this into a 2x2 matrix as well. So you can see Abhishek's laughing over this, like, what have I done? This is the first fireside chat of this year, and CDT is going on talking about matrices. Right, so you can see this quality of work on the x-axis, and there's money that you get on the y-axis, which pretty much sum up all of what we work for. As you can see, this bottom left quadrant is obviously something that you should avoid. If your pay is low and it's scrap work, it's something that you should avoid. If it's scrap work but it's high, I would say you will get a lot of that. That's the thing. If you're willing to like sell out or go back to doing things that you were doing, I know that there are some things that I would get paid a lot of money for, right? People have asked me to help them with social media strategy, but I think that social media for brands is an absolute crap idea, and the sooner it ends, the easier a lot of young creative minds' lives would be. But that aside, I know I could make a lot of money, and sure, if I'm able to say this because I'm in a reasonably privileged position right now, but if like shit really went bad, then I might need to do something like that. So just do enough to pay the bills, but actively start looking to move away, because the more you do this, the more you will get sucked into this. All right, I'm making money I'm sold out some of my principles, but I'm ending up making a lot of money. You will get sucked into that trap. Trust me on this. So just do enough to pay the bills, but actively look to move away. Now, this is an interesting quadrant, the low pay, but good on quality. And here we are veering on that do free work because you will get exposure sort of thing. Treat that with a bit of salt. I'm an advocate for doing free work, but as long as you get something out of it, and that something can't be exposure among 50 people or something. It needs to be something more meaningful. It needs to be something that can be monetized later. Like, for example, I started doing free gig reviews when I was first doing, and that's because I approached them. I say, hey, listen, I want to go to gigs and I want to write. So do you mind? I don't want to be paid. That's completely fine. They were a small independent blog. It's not like they could pay me in any case. What that did give me, though, is a fair amount of credibility in doing gig reviews. Got me FaceTime with some of my favorite musicians, and 6 years later, it got me a job at OML because of all the things that happened in the middle. So I think this is important. Do this to get cred, experience, etc., and of course work towards this, both from this side and from this side. That's really where you need to sort of do. So the projects that you have right now, try to map it out over here, your potential projects, what in your respective fields, what are these equivalents? I give you for marketing what it is for me. For somebody who's into product development or coding or design, etc., it could be completely different. So whatever it is, just map it out. And remember, it varies, right? What is scrap work for me might be the dream job for somebody else. So customize this to what you think is your crap and your starry-eyed person. So this is my simple thing that works for me. Personal branding, since somebody asked for it, personal branding or positioning is important, but you don't need to become an influencer. This is a sort of like thing that, oh, you take this course and you'll suddenly amass 50,000 followers and you'll become well known overnight. All that is crap. Really doesn't work that way. I think when you're a freelancer, positioning boils down to one thing. What are the tasks for which people will think of you immediately? Work towards that. In your friend circle, in your professional circle, what is it that you want to be contacted for? What is it that you want somebody to say, listen, listen, Abhishek, I know it's 2 a.m., but this shit only you can help me with. Will you help me? What is that thing that you uniquely can do? Or what is that you would like to do? And then kind of work towards that, right? This is something that that I have accidentally done, and now I'm actively trying to do. But to me, this is like a simple heuristic for this. Everything else kind of falls into this. And then once you know where you want to go, what you want to be positioned as, try to do something around it. So for example, if you want to be well known as a graphic designer, then it's not just a matter of saying that on your LinkedIn profile. It's also about sharing other work from other graphic designers, saying that, hey, okay, this design came out and this is what I think about it. This rebranding happened, this is what I think about it. This is something that you can very easily do, even to a small network of 100 or 150 people on your LinkedIn page. I am not a networker by any means. I abhorred all these networking events that are rampant in advertising. I've never actively gone out and sought to connect with people on LinkedIn, because I think if it's not genuine, if it's not coming from a place of genuinely wanting to connect, then it's pointless. Right, accept invitations for sure. The more audience that you have, better, but be selective in terms of who you're reaching out to, because when you're putting yourself out, you are imprinting your brand on somebody else who is receiving it. Right, so do something around that. Now that could be simple LinkedIn posts or Twitter posts, whatever the case may be. It could just be putting up stuff on Instagram once in a while, whatever the case may be. Put out your point of view in terms of positioning. You can start from there. You can do a course or even create content around it later. When I graduated from MICA in 2007 or 2008, 2009, a few years later, one of my juniors started a blog on FMCG logistics, and I thought that was brilliant, because this guy, he's a fresher, he's a young guy, he had some experience during his internships, but I mean, how many blogs on FMCG logistics are there in the country, right? So he might be read by only a few people, but the signal that he's putting out, that's the important thing. I think it's very important to, I think signaling is very important when you're trying to do positioning, right? Even if all 1,000 people in your LinkedIn don't end up reading what you're consuming, they should know that you're doing something like this. And I think that's very important. So let me give you like how this has worked out for me. And please remember that everything that's happened to me and the fact that I'm talking about digital marketing, all that today, is completely by accident. So hopefully that will act as an inspiration. So like I keep getting messages on LinkedIn like this all the time. My old friends from MICA pinging me and saying, unanimously, you were called the digital guy, even though I've never really try to position myself that way. So this is like kind of like what happened. Abhishek, I'm pretty sure we're going to cross over by about 10 minutes. I hope that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'll try to wrap up as soon as possible, but I think this little journey and context is important. So again, it's important. I say this because many times we look at so-called influencers and say, wow, they must have been famous from the start, or they must have done something. What I want to show you here is how somebody who studied in a small town, Thrissur in Kerala, for some reason has ended up getting a message like that, right? So when I was studying in Thrissur, I was very passionate about making it through to MICA, which for those who don't know is India's leading B school for the advertising and communications industry. Mudra Institute of Communications, Ahmedabad, formerly known as, now it's just called MICA. The only place where I could find any sort of discussion about this happening, obviously in a small town in India, not too many people were interested in MBA, let alone one specific college. So I must have been about one of about 5 or 10 people in the whole state of Kerala to actually want to go only to MICA. But where I did find them was an online community called Pagalgai, which used to be a community for a thriving community of MBA aspirants across the country. And that really became the first social network that I was actively a part of. And and then what happened when once I eventually got through to Mica is I started doing digital things. For example, I set up the blog for our college festival. I thought was honestly like a small little thing at that point of time, and it still is a small little thing. The blog, I mean, not the festival. Then I ended up, because of accident, because of the financial crisis and stuff like that, I ended up joining a small social media agency, even though my aim was always to work for one of the bigger agencies like Mudra or Ogilvy or Burnett or something like that. So this happened completely by accident, right? It also now a couple of interesting things happened over here, because Pagal Guy was a network full of MBAs and MBA aspirants. And as much as I hate to say this and sound like an elitist, it was the cream of the cream, as it were. All the people who were aiming to get into the MBAs, and because of that, a lot of the guys who I made stupid jokes with back in the day are like CMOs and CTOs and stuff like that today. And all these things kind of confluence together, and I started a Twitter profile in 2009 and haven't done anything over there except make bad jokes, honestly. And that has amassed me a following as of today morning of 13.8K. Does that put me in influencer territory? I'm not quite sure, although I would like to think I've never really done anything that, an influencer is supposed to do or something. So this is like a very, very accidental journey. A couple of things happened along the way because I was one of the few people to work in digital. I joined this little agency in 2009, when it was very, very much in its infancy, when digital marketing was very much in its infancy. So I got invited to speak to a couple of places. That's me in a cast talking at Goa Institute of Management 11 years ago. And then I worked at Ogilvy and Burnett. Again, it sounds impressive when you say that, oh, I used to head digital planning for Ogilvy and Leo Burnett. But the fact of the matter is, I was leading a team of 2 people that were making PPTs that were going to be added on to the slides that everybody else would be making. But still, it seemed like an impressive title. Everybody else thought so as well. And it's kind of funny when my bosses always would introduce me as, this is Deepak, he heads our digital strategy practice. Like, that's 3 people, you realize. But anyway, it also happened that I got invited to colleges to teach Goa Institute of Management itself, strangely enough. So I started teaching over this. So all of these things together, right? All things where I enjoyed. And I love digital. I love the space of the internet and stuff like that. I wasn't very fond of some aspects of advertising, to be sure, but I loved the potential of digital, etc. I've always been very vocal about what the internet could be used for good. Like, look at what we are doing right now, for instance, right? So as a result of this, so people might not have read what I was writing necessarily, but they knew that, all right, this guy is equal to, he knows internet. If I need internet issues, then this is the guy to reach out to. So over the years, I've got a lot of my colleagues, my batchmates reaching out to me saying, hey, listen, we are looking to go digital. Do you have recommendations for agencies or freelancers? Would you like to help us out? So all this, the reason I'm doing this flexing is to show that all this has been, and all this really has been an accident. Last year, I launched a course of my own. I expected 10 people to come. And like Abhishek introduced me at the beginning, there have been 300 people over 3 batches that have happened since pretty much been the center point of my life for the last 6 or 7 months. And I started a newsletter because there were some people in this course who said, I'd like to, be updated on digital marketing things. So I thought, let's make it a newsletter. And initially it was supposed to be only for students of the course. And then somebody else said, listen, I don't need to take your course because I already know digital, but I'll gladly pay for that newsletter. I said, that's an interesting idea. I opened it up for $300 a year, which I think is reasonable enough for, some updates, some interesting things that happen around the net and stuff like that. And it's got about 500 to 600 subscribers since. It'll never be the only thing I do, obviously. And I probably could have charged a lot more, but for me, the aim was different. For me, the aim of this really was signaling. The fact that I run a paid newsletter on digital marketing, internet communications, whatever, all that, it is a strong signal to people who are not in the space who could possibly hire me in the future. So this thing, as much as it is a creative outlet, it is also very much a signal planter. So that's the reason I said that little journey, right? And I hope really that there is inspiration to take from that, even though I don't think anything I've done is particularly extraordinary. It's just circumstance and a little bit of tenacity on my part, and a lot of PowerPoint, as you can see. So yeah, coming back to the initial question of positioning, it's easier if it is something that you care about. Internet is something that I care about. Marketing, not so much, but the space of digital, very much. I keenly follow, for example, how online concerts have evolved, how politicians in the US have been using digital. I, for example, think that the greatest ever digital marketing campaign was Russia's interference in the US elections in 2016 masterclass. And there's plenty of it that's written online in case you want to hear more about
the scandalous opinion that I have. Infusing your own personality or opinion helps. So there's a difference between, for example, I'll just go back to the graphic design example I shared. Just sharing your own work over and over again is different from sharing other people's work, which is very different from actually having an opinion or critiquing others' work, right? When I say critiquing, I don't mean putting down, right? You can say, okay, this logo changed, so some things have happened over here, etc., etc. So now you have moved from somebody who is just like shouting from the rooftops in terms of what you have done to mindless curation to curation with some nuance, right? So I think that is very, very important. If you're trying to build yourself as an influencer, and all the people who I consider extremely credible, whether they call themselves an influencer or not, they have been doing this over a period of time. It's not very easy to do that. If you're looking at personal branding, for example, one of the best people to learn from is a guy called Karthik Srinivasan, Beast of Tral on Twitter. Beast of Tral, Traal. Hitchhikers fans will know the reference. Now, I have been following this guy since 2009 or so. You know, both of us came onto Twitter at pretty much the same time. He's like a senior guy in marketing, probably about 10-15 years older to me, but then he's built his personal brand completely on critiquing marketing work and stuff like that. And it's over a period of time. It's not easy. You can't read a book, do a course, and just get that sort of credibility overnight. So it does take a little bit of time, but once that happens, there's compound effects, right? So I think this is very important to do. And I think it's something everyone can do at a small level. It depends on where you want to go. Do you want to be known for something you care about, or do you want to be known for something you're good at? Hopefully these two things are one and the same, and then take baby steps towards going there. Remember, shouting about your own work, mindless curation to nuanced curation, opinion, etc. That's sort of like the journey that you should be that you should try to take, be it on LinkedIn, be it on Instagram, be it running a newsletter, whatever the case may be. So that's the way I look at these things. And remember, it has a snowball effect. Once you have some sort of credit, you will be invited onto podcasts. You will be asked to do this. You will be asked to do that. You will be invited by the remote Indian to blabber about freelancing and wise work for you, etc. So all this kind of has a compound effect. And I call this sort of like a candlelight content. It's a term that I came up with this morning. Remember, some people will consume the content that you're doing because they are genuinely interested. Others will just know that you exist. When I need this, I will go to this person. And honestly, for many people, that's all that's needed. Everybody over here, for instance, my guess is if you have a LinkedIn list of 1,000 people, my guess is, say about 20% of that will be people who you actually work with and need to know your work on a professional or semi-professional basis. Rest are possibly classmates or colleagues, friends, random people, etc. It's enough for them. They don't need to read your content. They don't need to listen to your news, to your podcast, etc. But they just need to know that you do stuff like this, right? Eventually, when that requirement comes up for them, their friends, their organization, whatever it is, they will reach out to you as long as they have that positioning in their head. So that's the way I look at, personal branding and positioning, and it's hopefully something I can write a lot more about later. Around 3 slides. Finally, if you'd like to build something of your own, right, be it a course or be it a newsletter, whatever it is, I have a small scale, and feel free to modify it in any way you want, because again, I don't want to be instructive. I don't want to say everybody who wants to build a personal brand, for example, needs to run a course or something. That may not be possible as well. So I have a very simple scale that I use. What is it that you can do for free that, say, 1,000 people would attend, right? What can you do out of that for free? If you put out on Twitter saying, hey, I want to do this, 1,000 people, which 1,000 people will attend? Work towards that, right? It may or may not be the case right now. Work towards that. For example, I know a photographer friend of mine, and I discussed this with her first. What is it like? She was considering doing courses. Actually, I'll just show you the whole model. It's fairly straightforward. Right? What can you do for free that 1,000 people attend? What can you do for 100 rupees that 100 people attend? What can you do for 10,000 rupees that one person will pay you for? And then see where you land on the scale. For example, if it's a photographer who we are talking about, what can you do for free that will have all your friend list coming? Is it just take better photos with your mobile phone camera, a small workshop that I'm doing for 15 minutes, right? That could be enough to get 1,000 people in for free. Now, what can you do for $10,000 that one person would attend? It might be a pro photographer who wants to learn more. What can you do for $100 that 100 people attend? Maybe it's just your, people who just bought a DSLR and want to know how to differentiate between auto mode and manual mode. So obviously your input is probably 1/10 here of what you need over here. But once you now have this scale, you now know where to start from and indeed where you want to work towards. Some of you, for instance, might actually want to run a course of your own one day. See if you have the credibility to do that. Start off over here. See what happens, right? See how much effort you need and whether that's offset by the cost, by the amount you're making, etc. So I like to think of it this way. Do not be afraid to collaborate, especially from those from completely different fields. If you collaborate with somebody in your field, it's probably just going to be, if you're collaborating with somebody else with the same skill sets as you, then you're just bouncing off ideas, right? But for true collaboration to happen, and that's why I'm very excited about the project that I'm working with my friend with right now, because we're completely different. We have never spoken to each other professionally. The first time we're actually trying something. I think there's a lot of merit in that sort of, hey, okay, I know you're in a B2B industry and I'm a graphic designer. B2B, no, there's no design really. There's no company that's ever stood out with respect to design. Want to try doing something together, even if it's just a project? You never know what sort of conversation happen from there. Otherwise, if you're just going to find another guy from design, what will happen is in 5 minutes, the bitchy client talk will start. It'll be 5 minutes to start complaining about each other's clients and empathizing with each other's problems. You don't get, that's great for a drink, I suppose, but for work, I think that collaborating with others outside your field would be a great way of going about doing things. I am still working towards my ideal balance in terms of how to balance my time. There are days when I work 20 hours. There are days in which I have nothing to do or I want to do nothing. So I'm still working towards my balance. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to get to in a few months. One major piece of work or major project that I do for a period of 1 or 2 months, which takes up about half my working day. 2 smaller piece of work like editing an article or something that takes about 1 to 2 hours. One personal thing that I want to do, lots of projects that I want to get off the ground, learning something, be it through a course or being an article, going through the latest case studies in the field that I work in, etc., etc. Thankfully for me, because of my one major piece of work, which is the course that I'm conducting, I automatically end up learning a lot of things like the latest case studies, etc. So trying to pick up projects like that do 2 things at once have always worked for me. One, hobby, and like I say, exercise. Extremely important. I'm hoping to take a break, complete, switch off from everything in April and May 2021. Let's see how far that goes. I think that's about it because I now have a thank you slide. That's it from me. And those are the things that I do, and I will plug them later. But I think let's plug later, and I'm going to stop talking now.
That was
rapid.
In programming, there's a saying that naming is hard, but I see you have a thing with
what is hard.
Naming is hard. We find it very difficult to give appropriate names, but from your presentation, I can see that you have a really you can, if you want, move into programming someday. Candlelight, that was really,
I was quite proud of that myself actually. Hash include iostream.h. I've learned C++ for a few years and technically did spend a year at Accenture. So that IIT picture that you saw, I was supposed to be at Accenture doing QA at that point of time. So like all good South Indian boys, I have also done my stint in a software company. Hence, I know all the terms. And at Insider, I used to sit very closely to the product team. And that's a great thing about working in a startup, right? You have very close collaboration with the guys who actually make stuff happen. So very aware of what full stack means and what a sprint means and things like this. So I get the jokes. I think for me, that's the thing. I just need to get the jokes about the industry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think this was really, a great session, with freelancing or, with remote working. It's there's so many possibilities, right? So, the world is your oyster and you kind of feel that but then it's also overwhelming as well. And that's one of the things that you really, unpacked within your presentation, that, hey, there's a lot of, structure. From the outside, it might seem chaotic, looking at your profile, looking at, but the way you kind of structured it and unpacked a lot of, things, I think that was really helpful. There's a lot of things I've been, hearing it for the first time. So
Oh, okay. That's great. So yeah, I think a couple of things, right, which I always try and give advice which everyone can use. Which is why I don't want to say very clear on saying these are things that I have done work for me. For you, it might be different. All right. So what I try to do really is to say, okay, what worked for me, and what are the things that others can extract from there possibly, and apply to themselves. Right. Everybody operates in completely different ways, but I think the more people are aware of the variables, right? Variables in the sense, all right, what are the things that I like? For example, if you're ever faced with indecision with respect to a project, think about, all right, what are the points leading to that indecision, right? Is it whether the client is going to be good or whatever? You document these things, you may end up making your own little mental models or your own little heuristics. And the better you know this, the better. Trust me, everybody over here is capable of making, like, I don't want to like say make it sound like what I did was something great or something, but everybody I think is capable of making these mental models on their own if they just spend a little bit of time with pen and paper, as they say. Yeah, so I know on the outside it looks a little chaotic. I also think that I've recently been I've been gaining a lot of respect for personal flaws, and I think we, as especially as middle class Indians, or so-called middle class Indians, I don't think any of us are really middle class as reports say. um, we all are habituated to moving towards the mean, which is like, this is what society expects of you, and you have to be this way, that way. And as a result of it, a lot of us lose the flaws and the unique experiences that we have, which might actually, if amplified and if nurtured, might actually end up being a good thing later. So I have been spending a lot of time thinking about that recently, which is, what are the things that I have been embarrassed about or tried to overcome, but for what? Those might actually end up being my strengths, right? So I think that's something that everyone could sort of like take away, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the thing which I'm also trying to normalize with this whole community thing, that hey, go ahead and make your own mistakes.
Yeah.
Just maybe make sure that your worst case scenario is kind of taken care of. Like, as
100%.
long as you can play this game, you can continue playing this
100%.
game. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, can't agree
So
with you more. Can't agree with you more on that worst case thinking. I think again, that's another Indian thing, right? We don't want to think of the worst case and shoop, like whatever. Like, I think it's very, very important to think about what the worst case could be. Like, I'll give you an example of this in very, very real terms. When I was moving from advertising to OML, it was a huge decision, because at advertising, I had gamed the system. I knew like where it was going. I recently got promoted to AVP. I knew like in a couple of years VP will happen, whatever. Like, that path was so set, right? Like there is, and OML was a completely different environment. It's like completely chaotic stuff that I'd never done before. I will no longer be the big fish in the small pond. I will be a very, very small fish in an extremely chaotic pond. We don't even know what creatures exist. So for me, I was completely like there are lots of discussions with friends, drinks, wife, like a lot of like, okay, should I do this, shouldn't I do this? And finally it just boiled down to one thing: what's the worst case scenario that will happen if you don't enjoy what you're doing at OML, or if it turns out to be too overwhelming? You know that you can step back and go back to what you were doing before.
exactly.
That's it. On the other hand, if you continue doing what you're doing, then you're always going to be like, should I have, shouldn't I have? Similarly with freelance, when I finally decided to take the decision to get off full-time work and get into freelance, that also is same thing, right? If it doesn't work out, then you know for a fact that there are enough people waiting to hire you when you come back, right? Or at least that's what I'd like to think. And what that thinking also allows you to do is very clearly lays out what the variables are on the table. So once I did that exercise, I realized, all right, it's freelancing should, like, putting down papers is not something that should happen immediately, right? Think this through. Who are your first clients going to be? Reach out to them, tell them in confidence that you're looking to do something like this. Get the word out slowly. Don't announce on social media. You don't want your boss to find out you're quitting from a Facebook post, but work towards that slowly. And then once you feel, all right, your notice period is 1 month, 2 months, whatever, or want to take a break, whatever the case may be, plan it out. I think that future looking in terms of planning, in terms of what you're going to be doing, extremely important. Even if it doesn't work out, but you need to give it a shot.
Yeah.
I think we should look at the questions, no? Because
I think, but I'm still, seeing that people are sticking around beyond the hour. So
amazing. Thank you, guys.
I guess we are adding.
Somebody did ask for the presentation. Yeah, I'm sure. Happy to share it with you. I'll knock out some of the bits that are irrelevant, like my mug on top of GC Thrissur, and I'll PDF it and I'll send it across to Abhishek, who can then share it along with all the other. I have a text file open in front of me, which is stuff to plug during session. So there's the newsletter that I run. That's, I think, one of the things that I'd really like to plug over here. So I run a newsletter on a lot of nice digital things. So it's not necessarily a digital marketing newsletter. It's sort of like interesting stuff that happens around the internet, some of which has an implication for digital marketing. But one of the best compliments I got from a very close friend of mine who works completely different from what I do. He's a product guy, and he's never worked on, he's a DevOps guy. And he's like, I'm not a digital marketing person, but I love your newsletter because I end up finding something interesting that happens on the internet via it. So that's something that I will plug and leave over there. Everything else I'll send across later. Let's see, I'm just going to go up to the questions. Oh, Chuck Spoken Pago guy, that's nice. That's you. I didn't realize that you had seen the Pagal guy work, Abhishek. Real examples, okay, that I answered.
Chuck, I think you need to look at the Q&A thing. That will be easier.
Q&A. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Any tips for someone who is having average writing skills? How can she improve communicating with clients? Any cheat sheets? Not really. I think it's just, I think you just need to work at it. And honestly, if your work is not writing, right, then you don't need to worry. Let me put it that way. Right. I think sincerity matters more in a scenario like that. If you're pitching yourself as a writer and your English is bad or your communication skills are bad, then yes, then that's something that you need to work on actively. But otherwise, if you're looking to reach out to somebody, right, see, always look at it this way: how will the other person react? All right. So if you're going to send a very templatized message or something, which might be the temptation, then that's going to put the other person off, right? But on the other hand, if you're reaching out to them for, a very specific task for whatever, for programming or something like that, then your English skills or your communication skills don't really matter. What matters is what you bring to the table. And you can convey that in whatever language you want, whether it's in broken English, whether that's in, whatever the case may be. Say that, again, I go back to that slide that I said, why you and why them, right? Why are you placed to pitch to somebody else? If you don't have a reason for that, then you obviously need to reevaluate, right? But if you say, hey, listen, I've worked on this stuff before, you need this, and I think I will be able to help you out with this. If you're able to convey this, right, doesn't matter what language it's in. Right? If you pitch yourself a program and your code is bad, then obviously you have a problem. Similarly, if you're a writer and you're pitching, if your writing is bad, then obviously you have a problem. But if you're pitching yourself as something else and your communication skills are bad, don't really worry about it. And you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. You can write to them on email. Trust me when I say tenacity is very, 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 very much admired, right? It's very easy to reach out to people. It's very easy to apply for a job that everybody knows about, for example. But on the other hand, if you take the effort, for example, if you are passionate about a particular industry or you have experience working in a particular industry, on your own, do what is it that you are doing that other people pitching for that possible role are not doing. Find those people out, find out who the decision maker is, reach out to them, write to them over email rather than on LinkedIn. And then see how it goes from there. Your communication skills really will not, or your ability to phrase a sentence and all that will not necessarily matter at that point of time. I really hope that helps. That's I know that seems a little generic, but I think that's at least in this short span of time, that's what I would say for that. Next question. Sorry if I'm going to just answer a little quickly because I also do need to get back to the other things that I'm doing. So it'll take about 15 more minutes, I guess. Vishaka asks, I see you're doing different types of projects which are different in nature. How are you tracking multiple different types of projects? So if you are asking about how I actually track, then I have a very comprehensive and complicated sheet that I have made for myself. And the way I do it is I have visibility in terms of all the projects that I'm working on at any point of time. if I were to start brass tacks completely, right, how I would do it is, okay, I have this project happening, I have this project happening. I'd break them down in terms of tasks. If there is something like a deadline or something, obviously we'll adjust that also. Then I sort of adjust those into each week, saying that, all right, for example, today that's a task that I'll do for next week, right? What are the things that are due for that week? What are the tasks that are needed? Break those down and allocate that into Google Calendar or Asana or whichever tool works for you. For me, I've always worked on a combination of Google Sheets and Google Calendar, hence that works. Hence that works for me. I've never been comfortable with let's open our email and see which project to work on. I can't have that amount of unpredictability in my life. So taking the time out, I think one of the best piece of advice that I came across recently is the 1 hour that you spend on Friday evenings is going to make your next week very, very easy. I think that's very important. It gives you a sense of predictability. It avoids you being overwhelmed, and it also ends up, like for example, one of the things I'm struggling with right now is trying to make time for personal projects. So next time I get done with all my work projects, I'm going to find a way to integrate into that, reduce my work day from 8 hours to 6 hours, for example. We'll have to see whether that's feasible or not, because food has to be put on the table. But that's how I do that. I think it starts from right up on top, saying, all right, like this one slide which I mentioned, one major piece of work 3 to 4 hours, two small pieces of work 1 to 2 hours each, personal thing, etc., etc. Now it's not something that you can turn off and on a switch. It's not something you can do immediately, obviously, right? All of us have multiple projects at any point of time. It's not a switch that you can turn on immediately, but it's something you need to work towards. For me, I've realized the only way to do that is to take a clean break, get done with everything, because then stuff is just going to spill over. And then I want to try and implement this sort of balance. So that's the way I do it. Now, if you were talking in terms of mental models, how I switch from one to the other, I think it's just a matter of personal interest. Some of these projects feed off each other, like the digital marketing course obviously feeds off on some of the stuff I write for the hard copy, which also feeds off on a couple of other things. So in a way, some of the things I do are kind of interconnected, but apart from that, I think it's also very easy to do that as long as you're interested in each one of them. Each one needs to have a different motivation. One might be for money, one might be for creative satisfaction, and maintaining that balance, I think, is very important. So that's my answer to that. I hope that helps, Vishaka. Sahil asked, you mentioned document everything. Can you explain? Yes, by document everything, I mean, it's quite simple. Document everything means that, quite honestly, anything that you and the client might be fighting about later, that's it. Make sure that it's on paper so you know who to point the finger to. If you say, hey, you're supposed to deliver this on 20th October, you said, no, boss, you only said take 5 more days. Here's the email for that. That is essentially what I mean. Document everything in terms of we often get into this habit of negotiating on prices and deadlines over call. That's fine, but whatever the decision is, put it on mail. Say, all right, 25K was a fee that we decided. 20th October is when the deadline is. Please sign off on this, right? Send that across. Rather than, we'll bring it up later. This is where disagreements happen, etc. So I have been extremely anal about documenting everything and not starting work till the client gives a sign off on this, either on WhatsApp or on mail. And WhatsApp, I suppose, is documentable proof, as Arnab has shown us these. But yeah, that's what I meant by document everything. I don't mean document like stuff that you do on a Word doc for later reference or something. That's not what I meant. Although if you have lessons and learnings that you've learned for your own personal consumption, do that. But this is what I meant by document everything. Sahil also asked, do you plan yearly or quarterly for your freelance business? I wish I could give a clear answer for that. Right now, I would think I'm moving more towards quarterly planning for freelance. Like, I have very good visibility as to where my life is going to be till May. As a result of which, I know how much free time I will have to take on new projects, or think about a couple of other things. Because I think a year down the line becomes a little too far, especially at least in my line of work, which is marketing, content, etc. We really don't know. Some of my clients, we are doing stuff on an experimental basis. So for me, quarterly kind of helps. So here's the way I would look at it, and maybe there's another term or something I can come out with something like this. I think granular clarity in terms of where your quarter is very important, and vague understanding of where your year is going to be in terms of what you want to do. Like at the end of this year, I want to maintain this balance that I said, 60% of my time for work, 20% of my time for personal projects, 20% of my time for learning. It's not something that I can implement this quarter and I know it, but I want to end the year that way. So if you work towards that and the decisions that you make, subsequent decisions that you make are aligned towards that, I think that will help. So that's how I do it. Again, like I said, your mileage may vary. Possible to share expenses and income template with us? I wish I haven't made, it's not a templatized format and it's actually quite a complicated thing. So I'm very, so I would prefer not to, because I'll actually have to end up explaining what exactly it means. It's a complicated thing that I used back when, in 2010, 11 or something I started. Because everything that I buy on one side, this thing on the other side, etc. So hopefully I'll try to do something around that, but no promises. But I think there are plenty of templates that exist online in terms of tracking your expenses as well as your visibility. And to be very honest with everybody over here, I would say just make one on your own. Just use Google Sheets. Everybody should have a minimum knowledge of Excel. I'm not saying everyone here needs to know VLOOKUP and pivot tables, but the ability to, have comfort with Excel and, your tasks, etc. So my sheet right now, for instance, is a dual sheet that tracks both money as well as amount of time. And that's because it works for me that way. I don't want to impose my way of working onto somebody else. So I would say, figure out what works for you in terms of where you want to go with freelance. Maybe you're the type of person for whom hours you work a day is not important. For me, it's very important because I've slogged my life in advertising and I'm like, no more working after 9 p.m. Hard stop on that. So for me, that is very important. For somebody over here, somebody is, in your wild 20s where, all this doesn't matter and you're just knocking back another kind of Red Bull at 11 p.m., then that really doesn't matter. Then your priorities are something else. Then your priority might be, or every month is my income going 10%, for instance. Then you optimize towards that. I would say build your own sheet. Honestly, that's my biggest advice. So I can try and templatize what I did. I wouldn't recommend it for somebody who is not aligned with the way I like to do freelance work. So sorry, Sahil, I'll have to let you down on that. Last question, I think. Mukesh, I like the idea of sandbox. How did you learn? And someone starting, how should you proceed on it and convince the other side? Yes, I think that's where having a good relationship with your client really sort of helps. And for me, I didn't learn it from anywhere. I think I'm just an extremely paranoid person. And I think that really helps. Paranoid in a healthy sort of way, I guess. And I genuinely am worried about, whether a project becomes too big or too small or, gets out of control or something. And how to convince the other person is very easy. Make it seem like they are gaining something from this as much as you are. Don't make it seem like you are shirking work. You have to make it seem like, listen, we are about to do something together and we have absolutely no idea how this is going to go, right? You might end up paying me a lot more than I need to be. I might end up working a lot more than I need to. Let us give ourselves a period of 3 months so that we can figure. If everything seems to be going right, then we just continue this, right? You want me to work for 12 months, I'll work for 12 months, but let's do a trial period of 3 months first to see whether we are comfortable working with each other. It's going to be as beneficial for you as much as it is for me. If everything seems great, then great. We just carry on for the remaining 9 months exactly like how we did. If it's not, then we need to make some changes at either end. This, I think, gives them some comfort. The fact that they will have to do minimal amount of changing should things go south. So think of the worst case scenario from their end as well and solve for it. That's the way I looked at it. It's worked for me. Like I used to do some articles for some of my clients and now I'm on a retainer with them because that sort of initial trial period kind of worked. And yeah, I think that's like, the word empathy is thrown around a lot these days for many other reasons, but I think it's very important from a freelancer point of view. Always think about how your communication, whether you're reaching out to somebody, whether you're pitching to somebody, whether you are suggesting a new model of working with a client, how will they react? How are they likely to react? This is important because then you can solve for it. If they say they are going to react because they don't know how much, they may worry that after 3 months, you're going to charge a lot of money. Solve for that. Say, after 3 months, I might increase my fees because it's not working out for me. Don't worry, I will handhold you for a transition to find somebody cheaper. I have done that before and it works. If you are able to think through what potential problems are and solve for them at the point of pitching rather than them asking for it, I think this will go a long way in helping. I think that is as good a question to answer to end with. Abhishek?
Yep. This is awesome, man. I am going to, rewatch this entire episode again because I was distracted sometimes by the chat, and it was so dense that I missed some bits of it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Hey, no
I'm so grateful for you taking out this time and doing this.
Absolutely.
I'm sure people would agree here.
Yeah, happy to. So a few things I'm going to plug, and I hope Abhishek can send them over email as well if that's possible. One is a newsletter. Second is another newsletter that I run with a friend, which summarizes the news of the week. Nothing to do with marketing, or there's just very bad jokes. I run a podcast called The Origin of Things, which is the origin stories of brands, but I reveal the name of the brand only at the end. It is a short format thing, about 10 minutes, and it's got rave reviews from all 5 people who listen to it. So give it a shot. Then some articles I write for hard copy. I know some of your designers and stuff like that, so you might find that interesting. And we are moving more towards branding and marketing, so maybe that'll be relevant for more. My wife and I run an Instagram account where we make fun of the noble profession of advertising using our cats. So that's something as well. So I've put all that in. Chat. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, my link tree is at the end in case you want to reach out. I think the link for the link tree might be broken. Wait 1 second. Sorry about that.
No worries. So
yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think this is it.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much.
Extended a little bit, but it was so good that I was I did not want it to end on a very random kind of a note. I think we tried to address as many questions as possible, and yeah, Chuck, I think it would be great if we can have you in the community as well.
Done.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not easy for you considering the amount of things that you're doing, but just having somebody of your caliber or of your experience and who can just check in once a week also. I think that will mean a lot for everyone.
That is my complete mistake. I've been telling a couple of friends, I'm going to do something for the remote Indian. Are you on the remote Indian? Oh shit, yeah. So that's completely my mistake, and that will be solved very soon. So while I know I had one slide that said I've signed off from Slack, I think it's time to come back onto it for the right reasons.
Okay. Cool.
Super.
Awesome.
Thanks, thanks so much, and thanks to everybody who stayed all the way to the end.
That's pretty promising to see.
Yeah.
So yeah. Cool then.
Yeah.
See you everyone. Have a good rest of the day then.
Bye-bye. Have a good rest of day, week, weekend, everything. Yeah. Bye.
The year's just started.